actually want to do some questions with you to kind of help guide you since I'm not there in person for this lab. So first problem that I want to do with you guys step by step. Maybe you can attempt to answer this yourself before you see the solution that I'm about to give you. Okay, cystic fibrosis is a human disease that causes the lungs and digestive tract to fill with mucus. It is inherited in a recessive model. So it looks like the person must have lowercase d in order to have cystic fibrosis. A mother and father who are both free of the disease, so they don't have the disease, but whose first child has cystic fibrosis are thinking of having another child. What are their chances that the second child will be free of the disease? It sounds like we have to run a punnet. Let's go ahead and answer some questions before we do that. Parental phenotypes. Remember that phenotype is what you actually see. So I don't want their allele information. I want what they actually have. So it looks like the mother and father are both free of the disease. There are different ways to write this. I'm going to go ahead and just say normal for one parent and normal for the other parent. They don't have the disease, normal versus abnormal. All right, parental genotypes. Parental genotypes, how do we know what genotypes they're going to have? I can probably guess, but I don't have the exact information. I know that they're not homozygous recessive. They can't be homozygous recessive because they're normal. Cystic fibrosis would be homozygous recessive, so they could either be heterozygous or homozygous dominant, but I don't know which one. So I'm going to run a punnet. Before I run a punnet, I want to go ahead and clarify genotype to phenotype to help you guys see this, because we're going to kind of work backwards. So, to clarify, it looks like we have genotype, and over here I'm going to write phenotype. All right, I can either have three different genotypes. I can have homozygous dominant, I can have heterozygous, or I can have homozygous recessive. Homozygous dominant genotype, uppercase D, will be normal, individual. Heterozygous will also be normal. They have that dominant, uppercase D, right there. That's going to mask the recessive. But as we saw in the question, a homozygous recessive individual has cystic fibrosis. So you can write cystic fibrosis here. You can also write diseased. I'll just keep it as diseased. So those are my different phenotypes. So what are my parental genotypes? I'm actually going to do different punnets to help me figure this out. So the parents are not homozygous recessive because they don't have cystic fibrosis. The question told me that. So it could either be homozygous dominant, heterozygous. Let's try and figure that out. So I'm going to go ahead and run my punnets down here. If, let's say one of the parents was homozygous, and this is just a test, I don't know this, but let's just say one of the parents was homozygous dominant, and let's say the other is homozygous dominant as well. If I run this punnet, let me actually, it does help to do it in different colors, so to show you guys this process. So, if I run this punnet, bringing down my respective alleles to their box, I'll go ahead and do that. It looks like for this result, each of those boxes are homozygous dominant. So these parents, if they did have these genotypes, they would never get an individual with cystic fibrosis. They would never have that offspring. They just don't have the alleles to give cystic fibrosis. Well, it looks like this couple did have a child with cystic fibrosis. So this is not going to be genotypes of the parents. Okay, let me try another different genotype set. Go ahead and draw that down here. So what if, we'll keep one parent homozygous dominant, okay, but now I'm going to change it to the heterozygous option for the other parent. So I'll go ahead and do that. Run my Punnett. Okay, looking at my results, remember that I need to have homozygous recessive to get disease. I don't see lowercase d in any of these offsprings. I do see homozygous dominant at the top. I do see heterozygous at the bottom. None of those offspring as well would have cystic fibrosis, ever. If these two individuals mate and have offspring, they will never have an offspring with cystic fibrosis. This cannot be the parents' genotypes. Let me go ahead and try one more Punnett. I only have one more option to use, so I'll go ahead and use that option. Or I'll have one parent be heterozygous, and the other parent will also be heterozygous. Run that Punnett. Whoops. Different color. There. Remember that I like showing the uppercase dominant letter before the recessive. It's just good practice. Okay, looking at my results, homozygous dominant, that person will be normal, that offspring. 2 heterozygous, normal as well, but look, we have an offspring that could get cystic fibrosis since they're homozygous recessive or diseased. So then the parents' genotypes must be heterozygous. They both must be heterozygous. So to clarify, each of those boxes is a 1 out of 4 chance of having something. So I have 1, 2, 3 out of 4 being, or another way to say this is 75% being normal, 1 out of 4, or 25% being diseased in this situation. So I can go ahead and say, continuing on, all right, then my parental genotypes, you can keep it different colors, you don't have to use different colors, I just will, are heterozygotes. Bring their alleles down, just like you did at the beginning of the lab, 1 in each respective blank. So I'll go ahead and do an uppercase D, showing a dominant trait, lowercase d, showing that recessive allele. Uppercase D, lowercase d, those are the gametes. Okay, to answer the next questions. What are the chances the second child will be free of the disease? So this over here, this is what I'm going to be referring to when I answer these questions. So what are the chances the second child will be free of the disease? Remember, it doesn't matter how many children these parents have. We always refer to those boxes to answer this question. So the chances that the child would be free of the disease or normal is 3 out of 4, or 75%. And yeah, I'll go ahead and write 3 out of 4. You can also write a percent value for that. What are the chances the third child will be free of the disease? It doesn't matter how many offspring that these parents have. Every time an offspring comes into play, we have these chances available for that offspring. So it's still 3 out of 4. That doesn't change. Does this probability change after a certain number of pregnancies? No, it doesn't change.